Hello to everyone. Got Mark, Jesus, Sunshine, Saint, Lauren. I don't know who all else is in there. Jane is in there. So as long as you guys can hear me okay and see me okay, I'll just dive right in. So feel free to ask questions throughout. I'm getting better at keeping track of that as I go. But if nothing else, hang on to the questions till the end if you can't seem to get my attention. So I think Dave, you've still got a wrench. Should any troublesome members come in, I mean, you can always be pull the authoritarian boot. I don't mind anymore. Life's too short to deal with trolls. You know what I'm saying? So basically, New Ageism. I want to dive into this not in the context of what it specifically means. I know there's probably different, definitions of New Ageism. I'm going to basically dive into sort of New Ageism as it pertains to my exploration of spirituality outside of Christianity. Of course, I grew up Christian, left the faith for, my own reasons. You can explore that in a different live stream, more of my personal reasons, some of the stuff that happened to me. But I didn't talk much about what I did after that. Where did I go? What did I turn to? Did I just turn away from God? Did I not want any more religion, any more spirituality? What did I do? Did I turn Buddhist? So this is where all this New Ageism stuff sort of crept in. And I grew up believing, I was Lutheran growing up, so we didn't dive into this occultish, spiritual warfare stuff as much as I did when I was in a Pentecostal setting in my teenage years. So I do remember, growing up, learning about the dangers of the occult, the dangers of things like Ouija boards and psychics and all this other stuff, and New Ageism being the term that was used. And I remember reading a book that my mom had borrowed from the church library talking about the potential for essentially things to kind of go the wrong way and to be getting your powers or your source or whatever it is from the wrong source, being, of course, darkness rather than light. So that was kind of the idea of why it was scary. And I remember being very worried about that growing up. But then you grow up, you get away from it all. You're 19, 20. I ended up, out on Vancouver Island for a while where people are doing all kinds of spiritual practices that, you don't maybe talk about in a small oil town growing up. So I really did get pulled into many things, some of which I maintain because I think that they are genuinely less new and maybe more old. You might call them wisdom traditions from all over the world. Some of them are very much godly, I would say. They're very, kind of integrated and they all sort of have their own path, but they have good intentions. But there's a lot of other stuff, guys, that really lies in the murk. Some of it's just crazy nonsense. And you really see that. You see people that have fallen off the deep end with New Ageism, people that go in very smart, but then they start to they don't like something in this world, so they find and create a narrative to become something else, whether it's an alien or a spirit of some other realm or whatever else. You see these people that are just off the deep end. You see quacks. I'm going to get into a natural medicine. I'm going to dive into all of it because I know it is, as you say, Saint, it is hard to define, right? All of this is hard to define because that's the point of it. The point of New Ageism is to sort of catch all, in my opinion, to sort of catch all the spiritual people that need to find something but don't know where to go or what to do with it. And maybe really, for whatever reason, have rejected traditional religion, particularly Christianity. You see a lot of people that have said, no, I don't want to go anywhere near that. That was sort of the situation for me. I had a bad experience, still believed in God, didn't want to become an atheist, didn't want to join another religion, but I wanted to be spiritual. So when you're wanting to be spiritual, you can dive into pretty much anything you want. You can go to meditation, you can dive into sort of Buddhist principles, you can go to Unitarian Church, or you can do it all like I did. So when I say New Ageism, I'm talking about literally everything from just energy medicine, Reiki, stuff like that, reflexology, Chinese medicine. Like I said, you can dive into the health food realm, all of it. So I feel like I have a pretty good handle on experiencing a lot of this stuff. So first, I'm going to double check, see if anybody has any questions just to start off. Thank you, by the way, for that prayer to Jane, by the way, about the PPC. I have such good subscribers. You guys are so supportive of each other. New Age seems to be a pseudo spirituality without a personal God. Very, very true. So that's a good place to start, saying. So without a personal God, interesting way to put it, because the point that I have found in New Ageism, whether it be discussing sort of a source, a divinity, the universe, people like to pull out whatever word they can, but they really don't want to use the word God. In particular, people really don't want to use the word Jesus, but that's a whole other story. So I find a lot of people in that realm will sometimes speak to a source energy. They will refer to the universe very, very commonly. Or they will get rid of that altogether and take all of that power and control and put it in themselves. And I was speaking a little bit about this the past week with Steve and friends, just to kind of get my mind around it and really dive back into some of the stuff that I had learned. And it's interesting because I really think New Ageism is as much of a religion, or in many ways a cult, as many religions are. It's funny because most people that do it try to get away from that personal relationship with God. They don't want the dogma, and that's all they can see. They don't understand, as a Christian would, what a personal relationship actually looks like. They see dogma, they see tradition, they see humans, so therefore they see error, they see pettiness, they see BS, they see hypocrisy. And so people will leave the church, and they just sort of leave that idea of God behind, and they'll replace his name with anything at all. And that's where you start getting into these ideas that God is just an orb of light, or he's actually a female, because of course we have to have that element in there too. There's so many ways now to see God, and God is just a source energy. Now, here's the first point, is that I'm not against that idea altogether. I do understand that there's many religions in the world, and I have experienced a path to God that is different than what you might call traditional Christianity, or traditions that, might be found within Christianity. However, I will say that each time I was still seeking the Christian God. So even though I was having these experiences via a different method, I wasn't experiencing a different religion. You know what I mean? My intention was always still with God. So it's very hard for me to say what experience I really had. But I do believe that other people, when seeking God, are going to, be able to usually find him in some way if their heart is pure. I don't think it's fair for us to judge a lot of people. I think God is very big, and I think it's very difficult. It must be very difficult for him to see us put him in a box when he can be anything. He can speak through any song, any movie, any animal, any person, any one phrase. He's a very, very big God. And so that's something that I like to keep open. And it is something about New Ageism that did appeal to me. I'm just going to take a quick peek because I see a red highlight. Jesus says, heard it lacks critical thinking. What are your thoughts on that? Do you mean New Ageism in general? Before I answer that, Jesus, do you mean New Ageism lacks critical thinking? So I'll kind of continue on here. So I kind of felt like when I was dealing with New Ageism that there was a lot of people who were very unhappy, maybe had gone through trauma, maybe had a bad event, maybe were really unhappy with themselves. I see your answer, by the way, Jesus. Maybe, had some sort of trouble in their life, some sort of conflict. And because you couldn't deal with it, and it was just one of those things that was just, you just have to deal with it, right? This is where Jordan Peterson came into my life last year, and, pick up your damn suffering and bear it and be the best person you can be. This is the polar opposite. That message to me is the polar opposite of everything I learned in all of the New Ageism that I ever entered or studied or anything else. It's not about accepting the badness. It's about, ironically, they say they want you to let it all go. Let it all go. Nothing matters. Cool, man. Whatever. Don't get upset. Don't be angry. Don't have any, real emotions. You have to be able to be zen. You have to be able to manifest and think positively, and all of these great ideas that there might be a little bit of, something too, but not in the way people say it. But in the end, ultimately, you are still trying to take control because you can't submit to a higher being. So you end up trying so hard to find a way to go against your own reality, your own instinct, often your own personality. Try being a zen, super relaxed, what you'd say Timon and Pumbaa kind of character, when that's just not who you are. I agree we all have to relax, but some of us are just determined, stubborn, quick working, quick-minded little shitheads. That is what it is, right? And I learned to finally accept who I actually am. And that's a big part of, I find, New Ageism, is you're told to accept who you are, you're told to relax, you're told to submit to the universe, right? You're told to just let things flow. And yet you're supposed to essentially believe that you have so much control over your life. And I found that to be not empowering at all. And I found it to be really, really frustrating. To answer Jesus' question about critical thinking, I'm going to say, yes, there is probably a lack of critical thinking in this field. I'm not going to say everyone, because I've met some really intelligent, wonderful people, and I'm going to get into some of the positives of New Ageism where I feel it's useful, helpful, not dangerous, not scary. I've already touched on intent. Intent is the number one. It's a big one. The intent that people have, what they're seeking. Are you seeking God? Are you seeking a personal relationship, or are you seeking an experience? Are you seeking a pseudo, spiritual experience? Very similar to when people go down and do something like ayahuasca, San Pedro, etc. I can openly say that Steve has actually attended an ayahuasca ceremony in Peru before I met him. He went down with an intention that was very spiritual. When people go down with an intention that is, I want to have a cool, crazy psychedelic experience, it's a whole different ballgame, right? And this is where you start getting into folk medicine and intention and all that. That's a whole different topic, but it all does tie in. Intention is huge. When it comes to, though, critical thinking, this is where you sort of get into the aspect of people not maybe realizing the difference between a feeling or between the power of positive thought versus the ability to manifest your own destiny despite all of the many realistic boundaries and things that kind of go on in front of you. No, there's a lot of people that are forgetting that part of it. And I think that's the scary part. That's where you start to get what you might call the quacks. That's where you start to get the people that are kind of going off the rails a bit. Now, because I have natural health issue, or I have health issues, I've gone to natural health practitioners in many different fields, whether it be acupuncture, Chinese medicine, or different energy works, vibrational therapies, you might call it. So when you are seeking some sort of therapeutic benefit from these, and when you are a critical thinker, you do have to be very cautious of these people, because not only can they be kind of harmful for your spirit or just waste your money in general, both have happened, but they also give everybody who actually is doing something good a bad name. So I'm very, very, very cautious about really giving promotion to anybody in this field unless I trust them, I know them. There's a lot of quacks. It is what it is, right? It's very sad. I'm going to quickly check this here. Nothing new about the New Age Egyptian mysticism. Yeah, very true. A lot of this is actually really old stuff. Which JP moment? I wonder, Lauren, if Saint is talking about the JP moment in the Liberty University, that one that I did a few weeks ago, where he had been rushed on stage by someone with, I think, bipolar disorder. I'm wondering if maybe I'll see if that's what she's talking about. Sorry if I'm talking fast. Oh, about picking up your suffering. Yes. Yeah, that one is one of his better ones, I think. I don't know. To me, that's an opposite mantra to New Ageism. So after answering a question from the chat, I'll kind of get back on track here. I feel that one of the biggest problems when I mention control is sort of the belief of how much control we have over our problems. And I think that's where I ran into problems, is because I was suffering. I was physically suffering. I was emotionally suffering. I had bad experiences with the church. I didn't know what it meant to submit my life to Christ. I didn't know what it meant to have full belief. I didn't know what it meant because I was angry at the people that ruined it for me. And I was angry and confused about why God would let me suffer, right? And I thought that maybe I deserved it in some way, that something had happened. And then, of course, because you get into New Ageism, it's really easy to take that really way further down. You don't have to take responsibility. You don't have to face your stuff at all. You just have to find something to blame it on. So it's really easy to say, well, this is ancestral, or this is, people will even say that it's reincarnated stuff from records from years past, from a grandfather or someone else. I've heard you can pick up fragments of people. You guys have heard it? I've heard it all. You can pick up fragments. How does this work? Of other people's fragmented spirit after they die. They float around and you can pick them up. And some of us pick up people's that are bigger than others. And that's why we suffer from depression and anxiety. And you can literally find a reason for any anxiety, any mental health issue, any emotion, any problem. Just basically in the sense of like this. You can say, you know what, I think I'm hanging on to the reincarnation of so-and-so, and that's where this emotion comes from. And it's very, very concerning, to be quite honest. I'm looking in the chat here. I see you guys are chatting a bit about yoga and Kundalini yoga. Also very interesting. I did do some Kundalini yoga. I've had both good and bad experiences with that. Probably very much, I'm guessing, depending on where my head was at and whether I had gone into a good or bad spot. I'll dive into yoga in a little bit here. So when it comes to Jordan Peterson and saying something like Lauren said, that moment of pick up your damn suffering and bear it, that message is directly opposite of the message that you need to try to adjust your psyche somehow to accept the suffering, or you have to try to fix it with your own mentality, or you have to pretend that it's not even yours, it's just someone else's. And I've actually met people that have decided that they were not even human, they were an alien because they just didn't fit in this world, and therefore they're not even human. That's what I mean. You're adapting immovable realities to try to feel better about what is the reality. And I spent so much time doing that with my illness. And the irony of it is they are always telling you to accept, 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 submit, submit. Don't work hard to fight things, just accept and submit. But if you're going to work hard in this way. And if you don't work hard enough, here's the next point, you get a failing pass, or a failing grade rather. You don't get a pass. And this is something in New Ageism that I didn't recognize until I left it, till quite recently. Part of the reason I wanted to do this stream is because the the irony of it is that most of the people that leave dogmatic religion will leave it because of the judgment of other people. They don't like that they're expected to be good. They don't like that there's a sin element. They don't want to be judged. They don't want to be shamed. And arguably, and I've had this discussion with Dave, who's in the chat, who's done a lot of wonderful work for my channel and helped me a lot on my spiritual journey. And we've discussed this kind of element, and it's very, very real. By the way, I do see your question as well, Jesus, and I'll get to that in a moment. I'm just going to read it quick. And hello, Rainey. I just see that you stopped in as well. Just want to see one more thing here. Yes. So when it comes to the religion of New Ageism, you are meant to believe that there's no judgment. There's no shame. You're just going to be who you are. Everything is fine. There's no real truth. There's no bad. There's no good. It's all fine. That's a lie. There's always, because of human beings and the way we are, there's always some level of ego, whether they talk about getting rid of the ego or not. That's a nice fancy buzzword. There's buzzwords, just like in politics. Letting go of the ego is one of them. But the irony is you end up really judging people who just haven't believed enough in whatever ideology you're pushing. So for example, I mentioned this on, I think it was Joe's stream a couple weeks ago. I was at an energy healing training session, but a weekend long. This would have been a few years ago when I first met Steve. And at the time, I had been on hydromorphone, which is Dilaudid. It's a very, very strong opiate. And I was slowly coming down on my dosage. And I had gone down to a certain dosage, and I thought I had weaned off very slowly. Turns out that I didn't know it at the time, but my body was going through symptoms of withdrawal because my brain had been on it quite a long time. It wasn't used to this low dosage, and it was throwing me off. It was a very physiological, very real thing that was happening. I didn't understand at the time, and I was having trouble sleeping. I was getting these nightmares, night sweats, couldn't sleep, really, really struggling. I mentioned it to the instructor in the morning, who was a registered nurse, because this particular energy healing program is actually created by nurses to be used in Western medicine alongside real medicine. It's not meant to replace other medicine. And she said to me that I just wasn't praying to my angels enough. I just didn't ask my angels. I just didn't manifest it. I didn't tell myself that I was going to have a good sleep, and therefore I didn't have a good sleep. I've also heard this when it comes to food sensitivities. I cannot eat certain foods, period. End of discussion. It doesn't matter if I go into eating it with a good attitude and tell my body that it's fine. When the MSG hits the bloodstream, I'm screwed. Period. End of discussion. It's a biological reality. And this is where, to answer the question from before, are there issues with critical thinking in New Ageism? Yes. If you can get a nurse to not look at the physiological element at all, not ask any more questions, and only assume that everything is spiritual and cut the rest of physiological reality out, yes, we have a problem with critical thinking, particularly if that program is built upon what is claimed to be critical thinking and a mixture between Western and Eastern medicine. So you do have this element of disconnect of reality, and it's very scary because you're now judging people on whether or not they're getting better or how their life is going based on how they're acting. Do you see this? So no, there's no God, there's no judgment, there's no shame, there's no sin, everything's fine. But if you don't believe hard enough, if you don't manifest hard enough, if you're not positive enough, then you've done something wrong, and that's why you suffer, right? And this is where you have to be so careful. There is a dogma. It's just a different dogma. And that's something that took me a long time to figure out. Like I said, very, very recently. I'm going to answer the question here. Does New Ageism have an agenda? Think of Christian church, agenda of Islam, of Buddhism. I'm going to say not a coherent agenda because it's so wide, right? It's so open. And I think it depends on the person. I'm sure there are high ups somewhere, when we think of the elites that are ruling things in this world, I'm sure some of them are a part of this. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are demonic elements, kind of through the Church of Satan and all that. I wouldn't be surprised at all that there are connections. I wouldn't say it's a full agenda. I would say that it is full of a lot of useful idiots, though, if that's the case, because most of the people that are pushing it through do have good intentions, or a whole bunch of them just want to make money. That's, of course, an element that I don't have to get into. It's very clear that anytime you have something like this, people will be using it to make money and be famous. I don't trust anyone, basically, with like that perfect smile, photoshopped, there's just that look, that like cheesy car salesman look that people have selling snake oil. I don't know. You can always tell. I just wanted to see. I thought there was one more question. What are your thoughts about leftism adopting a pseudo religion about being green as if the earth is good to pay homage to? That's actually interesting because I was going to dive into leftism anyway, so I'll get into that now. It's kind of off topic, so I will apologize if I jump around a bit. I didn't make sort of an agenda here because I just wanted to let it flow. And there's so many things that I learned and dove into that it's, I couldn't cover it all if I tried. So leftism and New Ageism do often go hand in hand. This is something I'm learning politically. There's more to it left and right. There's more to it than just collectivist ideology of grouping together how people vote. That is very much, I've mentioned this before. I hope, I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but Fuel Project. If you go to YouTube and look up the Fuel Project, The War on Truth, it's a series of 21 videos, and they discuss the left-right paradigm as it stands for Christians, because people either think God is a tyrant, God of the Old Testament, very harsh, very, very firm, very cruel, but then they see Jesus as almost a pushover, too compassionate, too loving, doesn't have a backbone. Neither are true. Both exist in a perfect balance of hard and soft virtues. Very, very similar to left and right thinking. If you have too much of the, hard virtues, you're going to have an overabundance of righteousness and justice and truth. And if you have too much of sort of the hard virtues, it's going to be more disciplinary, very judgmental. It can be very rigid and very negative. If you have too much love, compassion, mercy, and kindness, but nothing else to balance it, you'll run into problems. This is the same with parenting, right? And so I think when it comes to New Ageism and leftism, and especially the climatology cult that I think it kind of has become. So is veganism. It's also another one. There's a few subsects of like cultish mentality. Not saying everyone that believes in climate change is in a cult, nor am I saying everyone who's vegan is in a cult, but there is a very clear cult mentality when speaking with a lot of these people. And it does seem to blend right in with that leftist ideology. Bigger government, for some reason, dives in there. I can't figure that out yet. But this trust, this weird misplaced trust, that's what I noticed. A misplaced trust in large government. Despite the discussion of it being empowering, it's actually not empowering at all. There's no personal responsibility, only personal freedom. And that's what I see. So when it comes to the leftist cult of sort of the green climate change thing, it fits all right in. And I meet people like this a lot in my industry, which is natural health, because I do support environmentalism to some extent. I would say more conservationism. I joke that I'm a tree hugger because I do love being outside. I recycle as much as anybody could ever recycle. I will take recycling home from work to make sure it doesn't get thrown away if I think it can be useful, although I'm learning how wasteful that can be as well, a whole different story. I try to eat clean. I try to, I don't like factory farms and so on. But what happens when you get into environmentalists or food stuff, which is all the same, you really are looking at a bit of a religion, and you're never good enough, right? So this is where like vegetarians are cutting back on their meat, but they might still eat eggs, they might still eat milk, and they still eat honey and all that. Well, a hardcore militant vegan will say that's not good enough. That's not good enough because that might be whatever. There's a whole list of reasons. I don't really understand them all. I know industrial farming is gross, and I think that's pretty much the reason. I'll never understand why you can't just have a farm, but that's a very different topic. If I get into vegan and beef, I'll be on here for 3-4 hours. It is a religion. People are obsessive. They push it, they preach it, and they shame you. They shame you if you don't do it right. And it's no different than anything else in the left, right? You're seeing this now with the LGBTQ movement. Like there's people like ripping each other apart within the movement because of things like transgender sports and stuff that's, now come in and made a bit of a ripple. So it's never good enough. Like if you don't agree with everything in a progressive agenda, you don't make the cut. And New Ageism is very similar. If you don't just submit to the light of the universe, like you're just a hard ass, or you're too old fashioned, or you're too traditional. If you maintain Christian values as a new ager, no, you know, Christ isn't valid. They push him out. It's really weird. Everything is so cultish, and I find it really concerning. So with climate change, of course, that's a concern because you're getting money out of this. Tons of governments are making huge amounts of money on this, and it's also scary because it's telling people that we're all going to die, right? So that's a little bit freaky as well. I'm just going to quickly, hello, Scribbler, SS, I call you. Timothy, my potential cousin or something, we don't know. New Age doesn't believe in God as creator, savior, and judge. Exactly, Timothy, exactly. They see God as sort of just another name for a higher power. Now, if I've missed anyone's messages or anything in here, I do apologize. Let me know if there's like another question at all. But just to kind of dive into that idea of how God is viewed in New Ageism, yeah, that's just another word, right? That's just another word. If any of you have been through AA and whatnot, I think there's like a higher power concept. There are people that will reject God and reject Christianity entirely. That's not really the people I'm speaking of in New Ageism. I do have people in my life that are agnostic or atheist to the point of just pushing, hating, right? But I don't find that many people are like that. Usually something has happened to people that are that angry. For example, I have a friend whose son went through really bad alcoholism, and he has health problems, and alcohol could kill him. And he was going through AA, and she didn't like the idea that it brought up a higher power and prayer, and she pulled him out of it. And I remember saying to her, you know, even if you hate God and hate Christianity, he has an opportunity to feel a bit better and maybe save his life. You know, is it not worth the pride? Nope, the pride was too important. So, I mean, there is a pride. New Ageism, I don't know if it's a pride against God. I would argue it's often more, I don't know, sort of a resentment. I'm going to say resentment more than pride. I see Jesus is pointing up. I might not see it. Oh, here we go. I didn't want to ask, since you mentioned it, ageism having satanic elements. Heard of sects that openly worship Lucifer. Satanism as God. Is this common? That's a tough one. Again, I can't promise that it's not happening. It didn't happen in my sect because through all of this, my gut remained intact in the sense of getting the sense for when something was dark. I could usually tell and I would leave. Or I would back off or shut down or whatever it is. So I didn't get into any weird, really dark satanic stuff. That being said, I've seen in the chat, just kind of as I'm looking through, there are people that are discussing things like yoga, Kundalini yoga. I've even heard of Mandela's. Depending how deep you go into the fundamentalist Christian sort of ideas behind this, you could really argue that everything from Harry Potter is the occult to everything else, right? So it depends how far you want to dive into this conversation. There are satanic elements, though. I don't know that I believe the Mandela behind me is satanic. I don't think that's true. That's a good example. It's sacred geometry. God created everything, including multiple examples of sacred geometry and spirals and things in the world. And I think that's one of those beautiful examples of sort of the majesty of God, that in no way does that disprove anything to me. I don't think that's evil. That being said, you know, I don't know. I'm reopening my eyes to a lot of this, Jesus. I really am. I really don't think I can say that all of this is as good as it used to be. I've gotten rid of a few books. I've had to take stuff out of my house that I feel has bad, how do you say this? Bad totems, bad energy, bad spirits. Like, I do very much believe in the spiritual battle. And I think what's happened is that maybe people aren't pushing Satanism, but I think that Satan has found a way to get his way in there. I think he's in there, and I think he's disguised as light quite often. That's my thought of it overall. Let's see here. Yeah, higher power, Falcor, exactly. She always said higher power, and that's fine if that's what people believe. But everyone's so scared. Everyone is so scared to just say God or say Jesus. They just won't say it. And it's like, that's why I say I think it's a resentment, like a refusal to honor that. Ask Kelly about that. They think Christ is only an ascended master and encourages spirit guides. Yeah, that's true, Saint. A lot of people believe that Jesus is just another of an enlightened being. So he's just up there with all these other great people that have done great things, and that he wasn't in fact the Son of God. And to be honest, I believed that for a few years when I left my faith. I never lost God, right? But the Jesus thing, until very recently, I would say for sure the last year, but I would say as recently as the last couple of weeks since my dad got diagnosed with cancer, I still found myself hesitant to say the word Jesus. I still found myself hesitant to say I'm a follower of Christ. Why? I don't know. Just that word, right? That word, people are so afraid to even say it, and they think that it turns you into this Bible thumping dork or something. I don't know what it is. But then going through Easter, I've had some pretty incredible experiences, and really being asked to essentially be willing to be persecuted for Christ, which is where I'm at right now with this channel. I wasn't going to get to this till the end, but we'll let it flow. Really understanding what the disciples of Christ went through at the time when he was alive, and what he went through, and that he was essentially a dissident, but a good, pure person that was killed anyway. And when you understand the gravity of the people following him and what they endured, many were killed for their faith. It really, really makes you think. And so, yeah, I don't know. I find it interesting that Christ has been just pushed away from all of this, when in fact, he's really, even if you did believe he was only an enlightened spiritual being, he's one of the greatest, right? Pretty incredible person. So yeah, the idea of Christ and being Christ rising again, all of it has been newly sort of learned in me. And I would say I never understood it until recently at all. This Easter was huge for me. Good Friday was huge for me. Also true. I just saw that last one from eternal recursion. On the other hand, they don't have a personal awareness of the greater consciousness. Very true. Oh, I see AJ's in there as well. So I'm not really sure where to kind of keep going from this. I do see a mention of something about Aboriginal land, which has nothing to do with my comment, but it makes me think of another element I'd like to talk about, which is animism. Animism would be something that a lot of First Nations people would follow. It's sort of a loose term. I wouldn't say they all say they would follow animism, but animism is essentially belief that everything has a spirit. They often do believe in a great spirit or a creator. The word creator I know is used quite often, especially with, say, Cree people in Saskatchewan who also have a faith in God. I've been blessed enough to speak with elders at sweat lodges who have a mixture of Christianity and their old ways and traditions, which I think is beautiful. These are the sorts of things that I do think are possible when it comes to like an interfaith model. So I will talk about that. First Nation spirituality is something that I do feel close to. I've been to 2 powwows at this point, and I will tell you, I felt God moving in that place. Absolutely. I was moved to tears, particularly the first year that I went. During the dancing, there was sort of a grand entrance, and they had people from all over North America in their regalia, I believe is the word. And they had the drums going, and there was that rhythm, right? That beautiful rhythm. And then just the sanctity of what it meant to them was so incredible. And I cannot deny that I felt God in that place. And this is where, despite the fact that I'm a Christian and I'm very nervous about New Ageism, and I very much believe that Christ is the way to God, I do also believe that God can sort of be found in these other ways. I can't deny the whole world of that. I feel it would be a little naive of me. I feel it would be intellectually dishonest, and because I've experienced it, right? So that's something that I would recommend looking into. I've been to shamanism courses. There's some stuff I took away from there that I would be cautious with, but even in a shamanism course with the right person, it's very important to recognize the evil from the light. Again, intention is huge. You don't want to be messing around with dark spirits, dark entities. So any of these, for me, I gravitate towards what I would call old wisdom traditions. So I gravitate towards Ayurveda, which is ancient Indian medicine. I gravitate towards Chinese medicine. We're talking thousands of years, right, of practice. I gravitate towards Aboriginal shamanic practices that have been found to exist all over the world, even before people could have met each other. There's very similar, God revealed himself to these people in his own way. So I'm very focused on and more trusting of anything that really does focus on God and focus on sort of that meaning, as opposed to this self-fulfilling, everything is awesome all the time, just think it and dream it and it'll all be so kind of garbage. Would the world be better off with one religion or multiple, AJ says? Oh God, that's a tough question. There was a time when everybody was sort of separated, right, with their religions, and then it didn't matter because people were doing their own thing in their own land. Everything's very mixed now. So we have found a way, mostly, to live in peace together, mostly. There are certain religions you don't hear of causing a lot of grief, particularly Buddhists. I've noticed like Taoists, you're not hearing of Taoists blowing places up. There's so many religions, we can't name them. I mean, there's tribal religions from every area of the world. There's so many religions. How to say whether we're better off with just having one? I don't know. I don't know if we could have one. I just think we're all too different. We have such different customs, languages, everything from how we get our food to, you know, our marriage traditions are different. So I can't see there being one. There are unfortunately a few that really don't mix, right? And this is what we're seeing now with, and I haven't got into it yet because I just don't know where to start, but what's happening like in Sri Lanka, the clear war on Christianity that has been on for thousands of years and nobody talks about it, but the war that Islam has sort of waged upon both Judaism and Christianity. And we're starting to see it now more because of social media and people paying attention. But this is a case of like, how do you mix a religion with another one that hates it? I don't know the answer to that. In that case, maybe you're better with none. I don't know, right? But when you go with no religion at all, then you get this whole godless society. And I know that's a big problem too. It's a tough one, AJ. I don't have the answer to that. I wish that I did. Wish that I did. Not that wise. I just want to see here if there's any more questions. I don't see yet. World religion is satanic. And, yeah, and it's interesting because to get back into the idea of sort of the Satanism stuff and how it all ties in, I think there is something very, very inherently dangerous about just sort of letting everything be very laissez-faire, live and let live. All is equal, right? The idea all cultures are equal, all practices are equal, all beliefs are equal. That's not really true. And I do think that it puts people in a position to really open them up to some scary stuff. So this is where I'll dive into, now that I've got a captive audience, we'll see how many I lose after y'all think I'm nuts. I'm going to share an experience that I had with regards to, I guess you could call it a belief in ghosts. I don't know, spirits. Like if you were a Christian, you're going to have different views on this. You're going to see it more as like angels and demons. At the time, I didn't really focus on the spiritual battle. I knew that you could be open to bad things. Thanks, Rainey. You're nuts. Well, we already knew I was a little bit nuts. You guys wouldn't be here if I was completely normal. That's no fun. I knew that I had to be careful being open to bad energy. When you're working in energy work or you're wearing stones or anything, you're talking about protecting yourself from bad energy, from bad spirits, whatever else. This is a common thing that many religions and people have done. It's been a custom in many tribes, particularly in North America, South America. Crystals, stones, things like that, things that are meant to protect you. Of course, you have things like hoodoo, you know, and voodoo, where you're sprinkling salt around your doors to try to protect yourself from spirits, all of that stuff. So I think there's a belief in the afterlife in most cultures, in most religions. And in the New Age world, there is a belief in that as well, although it can be a little more diverse because you have so many, anything goes, right? You have so many different views. Everyone's got a different perspective on it. So we used to, well, we didn't used to, we still go for the odd road trip when we can. We were coming back from your neck of the woods, AG, out in Stonewall near Winnipeg. And we always take back roads if we can. So we were taking a back road through some rural areas and found a beautiful old church. And I always try to stop, and often these churches are unlocked. You can just walk in. We're talking like middle of nowhere if you guys aren't anywhere near rural Canada. So, you know, these little small churches, they're old. They were built by pioneers. And there's usually a cemetery attached. So we pull up to this church spontaneously, and there's a beautiful cemetery on all four sides of it. I can't remember the denomination. I think it was Anglican. And we're walking around, and I'm noticing on these gravestones. Now, this was right after, just for context, to tell you the dangers of this. So we had just gone, Steve and I had gone to a shamanic workshop in outside of Winnipeg. And it was our second one. So it was a pretty intense experience. You're dealing with journeying, you're dealing with drumming, you're dealing with all kinds of really interesting things, right? And so you're very open spiritually, open wide up, right? And we'd had some really good positive experiences. It was very good as a couple. Some stuff was really great, but you're open to everything at that point, right? And if you don't think about it, it can be a little sketchy. So we get to this cemetery, and I'm looking at all these headstones, and I note that many of them are young children. And I felt kind of sad because I knew that, you know, maybe there was a tuberculosis outbreak or something like that. And I went to walk away, and all of a sudden, I was struck with the most immense grief that I've maybe ever felt. It wasn't mine. It was so strong. It was like I was taken over by something. And I started bawling in the middle of this cemetery. And Steve's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I explained, and it lasted maybe a minute, passed. I left, and I was a little bothered, but I figured, okay, well, maybe there was some spirit showing me their grief. I don't know. Maybe they lost a kid. I have no idea. I brushed it off. We got home, and I think it was 2 nights later, I had a dream. And I've always had vivid dreams, but this was something else. So I had this dream where I was laying on my stomach, essentially, and somebody was standing over me, and they slit my throat. And in the dream, sorry, this is really graphic, but in the dream, I'm bleeding out, and I can feel myself bleeding out, gasping for air, dying. And someone's over top of me, and I can't see them, but I can hear them laughing, cackling. It's evil, right? And they're laughing at me as I bleed out, as I die. I woke up screaming, freaked out, screaming bloody murder, bawling my eyes out, just in a panic. And Steve, had to comfort me, and it was a big mess, and I was really shook up about it for a couple days. I couldn't wear a turtleneck. I couldn't put necklaces on. I couldn't put a scarf on. I couldn't touch my neck. I kept seeing symbolism of people's necks getting slit. Because I was so into New Ageism and stuff, I didn't go to God. I didn't do anything like that. I sent a message to the shaman and said, "Hey, any ideas?" "Oh, well, this is, you're being shown murder from another life." And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't really feel right. And then I sent a message to someone else. "Oh, well, that's just a dream, and it's indicative of whatever, something else. You're feeling like you aren't open enough with your throat chakra, being your chakra in your throat area for essentially having communication and whatnot, if you're dealing with energy stuff." So, there's all these different theories. It's metaphorical. It's this, it's that. Nothing ever sat with me. I just kind of stopped asking because I knew I wouldn't have an answer, but I always felt just off ever since that happened. About a month in, we had some bird feeders out. We were starting to watch birds in the backyard. Now, this is in Regina, Saskatchewan, in the middle of the city. And we got this bird on the feeder, and it was this beautiful white bird, white and black bird with red all across its throat, kind of down like this. And we'd never seen it before. And we looked it up and couldn't find it. So I called my birder friend out in BC and asked if he had seen it before. And it's called a rose-breasted grosbeak. In Cree, it means one whose throat has been slit. It is not a bird that comes into the city very often. And he was very surprised that we had it there. It showed up twice. We never ever saw one again. I continually got these messages. Finally, after months and months of these sort of little moments of just feeling awful, it sort of subsided. But to this day, you guys, I still have a dream every night about the same building. It's just a different scenario, same building and same field. And I could swear to you that something happened that day, right? And I'm just realizing now the potential of what I let into my life that day, the potential of negative spirits that really exist. And it's not just energy and you throw a stone on and you're fine. Like, we're talking spiritual warfare. And I don't know what happened to me that day, but I was attacked by something, right? And something attached itself. And it's really scary. This is where I assume I'll lose some people because you'll think I'm nuts. But like, I can't tell you how real that was, that dream. That wasn't a weird dream. That was something else. And it changed me. It changed things in my life. I see a question. Have you heard of the Hague and sleep paralysis? I have heard of sleep paralysis. I've never had those experiences in general. I've always had very lucid dreaming. That was the first time I ever had that. That was intense. Put it that way. AJ, dirty joke from AJ. Sometimes when Rants is missing, I do need a good dirty joke. So I'm glad AJ's taking that role on today and keeping it nice and light. I do appreciate that. Astro travel. No, I haven't heard of astro travel. I'm always nervous about that because that's where we get into the 7th, 15th dimensions. And I heard so many people that were a little bit off the rocker for all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I don't know, like I said, where I'm going with this in particular. I thought I'd talk for like maybe an hour-ish just to kind of dive into it. I think it's something I could probably talk about for a while. I don't know how far to get into it. I don't know how many people are out there watching at the moment, what you guys are feeling, if you have any big questions, because I think that I could get into this for quite a while because I've had so many experiences. Now, to get into some of the good, I've sort of touched on some of the good. there are some things that I think have been really valid. I think energy training has been valid. Energy healing, I actually only took because I found a Christian teacher, found him in a magazine, and he is a Christian who has always had the gift of laying hands, essentially. He does have ridiculously warm hands. I can't even explain it. It's bizarre. But he has always sort of had that vision in his life, and he ended up doing Reiki, and he talks to churches about how it all connects. He's had some cool visions and dreams to talk about, even just things like the serpent around the stick, talking about how it relates to numbers and how it relates to current health and ambulance symbols and things like that. There's a lot of stuff going on that does show that God has been present in many faiths, in many paths. There's evidence that God has spoke to people of many cultures and colors and in different ways. So I think that in that capacity, energy work has been good. It has introduced me to some other ideologies. Having a concept of energy or an aura is in no way anti-God. I try to look at it now as a Christian. Am I doing something that's like anti-Christ? And this is the key, right? This again comes down to the ego. People will say, get out of it, recognize that you're just a channel for source energy. That's just new ageism. That's just straight like scary, not good. And I see now why God pulled me away from that for so long. As I go through all this politics and stuff, I've really avoided. I have more than enough classes to do this as a career. But I put my table away because I've needed some time. And part of it, I think, is because I didn't understand, like, that's God, period. So if you're getting some results, and I have had results, you guys, like I've been able to diagnose people's bladder infections without having met them. I've seen images of people's, babies that had died and miscarried that they'd never told anyone about. There is something to be said for energy work. We can talk about that another time. There's a science to it. It's interesting. But if I ever felt anything or got anything, it was God. It wasn't me, right? And this is where you have to be so careful with New Ageism, especially as a Christian. If something claims to be better than God or bigger than God, but they will not use the word God, it's not God. This is where I think the devil comes into play and has a heyday with people, because they're open and they have what they think are good intentions, but they won't give the power to the person that deserves it, or to the entity that deserves it. And then you end up with this really, really wide open plane of either just ineffectiveness and craziness, where you're just wasting money, or like I said, you can damage your spirit, you can damage your soul, right? The Holy Spirit, if it's authentic. Exactly, Timothy. The Holy Spirit, now that's an interesting way to look at it. Energy work and whatnot, when you talk about the spirit of things or the energy in things or animism, that's Holy Spirit. So this is where sometimes there are just different words that Christianity kind of claims, but are relevant to other religions. I think we need to be open to understanding that other people are seeking God as much as we are, right? But you can tell by the Holy Spirit. That's very true. The wisdom, right? Now that you've scared me with your story, Scribbler says he's going to sleep. Good night, Scribble. I hope you don't have any terrible dreams. I'm sure you'll be fine. Just don't go to any cemeteries, man. Just stay away from that. Steve won't let me go back to them now. He's not a very won't let me do things kind of guy. I'm sure if I ever let that come out in chunks, they'll tell me how oppressed I am. But he was like, I don't think we're doing this anymore. I think that maybe you shouldn't be going to these places, right? But my sister's had some bizarre experiences too. I've become the woman in the family that if someone has a weird ghost experience, they're like, Kelly won't think I'm crazy. So I guess there's that. I don't see any other major shares. Oh, here we go. I've known gurus, shamans, yogis, priests, and nuns. New Agers have spent my life studying mysticism, religion, spirituality. You're not nuts. Thank you, Eternal Recursion. I appreciate that. There's stuff that we can't explain, right? There's just stuff going on out there that you can't explain it. And I've heard it said that science sort of is there to explain the tangible, the things that we can measure. And it's very, very relevant. And I am not a person that says science is against religion and vice versa. If God created human beings in the world, then I believe that science is sort of a part of that. And I think that, for example, with my illness, which I'll get into one last element of this before I let you guys go, or yes, you can go whenever you want and I can talk to myself. I think it's important to kind of just really recognize, again, intention, where you're looking for your help, kind of what you're getting into all of this for. Because when it comes to, say, for example, a health issue, if you're not really aware of the fact that God does use science to help you, then you're really discrediting yourself. I think that like people, I guess it would be Christian Science and whatnot, that refuse to take medications because they think everything is spiritual and nothing is physical. I find that really scary. no balance, no balance whatsoever. God created our body, God created the earth, God created all of it, right? So if you believe that, then there's no reason that you should refuse to live on that earth. We do have a biological system. Modern medicine is amazing. I have had, for my own healing physically, I could not have done it without modern medicine and surgery. I also could not have done it without natural medicine, without changing my diet, without changing my lifestyle, without learning how to handle stress. I do meditate. I just am more careful about what meditation means now. I do spend a lot of time focusing on my spirit, focusing on what energy means. You know, there is even just an element of energy exchange in this right here that I'm doing right here. I find this less exhaustive than having this conversation with 14 different people, because you're always exchanging energy. When you're someone that likes to give and nurture, you will find that your energy will become depleted, and you will find yourself in relationships, until you understand this, where people are using you, essentially like energy vampires, they would call them in the new age world. Can be subconscious or conscious, but you have to be careful of it. And so energy is real. I'm glad I've learned all of this. I couldn't have gotten better without it, but I couldn't have gotten better without understanding the importance of doctors and of medications and even pharmaceuticals. You can be cured through God, through a person, if he gave them the gift and the desire on their heart to go to school for 12 years, and the gift to have a steady hand and cut you open and remove something that's hurting you. That's incredible, right? That's a miracle to me. So I think sometimes Christians, again, we put God in a box and we say, I think I said it, I don't remember who I was chatting with, but you're asking for help and God sends you help, but it doesn't look like the form you think it will. It's not mystical enough. It's not cool enough. So then we just reject it. Well, I'm sorry that the help was a needle this time, or the help was a surgery, right? And so I think that's a big part of this, is really, really getting into reality. And I think that's one reason I wanted to speak out about this, is because New Ageism and natural health, all of it, people tend to kind of go into them all with usually an act of desperation. It's often because they've have some sort of spiritual crises or personal or psychological crises, or a health crisis, which was my case. Health crises mixed with abuse, mixed with losing my core values from leaving my faith. And it was a disaster. It was a mess. And it leaves you in this place where you're seeking, right? And you are seeking healing. And I did find a lot of great tools, but until I came back to God, there's no spiritual connection that compares to what happened to me on Sunday, when myself, and my spouse are holding hands in church in solidarity, while the pastor, speaks, or the song is on, while I'm in worship in my room. I've had Reiki-like experiences now with God, and that feels more authentic. It finally sort of makes sense. It's like the missing puzzle piece. You can learn all these great things, but if you don't let God into the equation, they don't mean anything, right? They're either dangerous or they're nothing. They're neutral, you know? See here. If there's any more questions. Good night, Jesus. I think Jesus is heading out. You're very welcome. Yeah, when sick and weak, energy exchange is massive. You understand, Saint. You understand. Illness is something that's a tough one. People don't realize how much it's like having, how do I explain this? It's like having a battery that's not quite as charged as other people's. It takes more to charge your battery. You have to be very conscious of what depletes your battery. And it's much like a bank account that's going to run out of money. If you run out, you run out. Like, there's none extra and you have to rest. It's a tough one. People don't realize. I'm going to read Jane's there because I've read her testimony and it's beautiful. I was completely healed of 4 kinds of depression, chronic pain, one leg grown from being 1 inch short. So many things. I never get sick, headaches. I pray and see people healed. Amen. That's awesome, Jane. That's awesome. And that's something too, because this is another example. People will mock religion. Well, you can't expect God to heal you. You can't expect it. That's crazy. That's a miracle. That doesn't exist. Well, we all know that there are miracles and times where there's medical science they can't figure out what happened, where there's a doctor that says, I don't know how you're healed. I don't know how the cancer shrunk. I don't know, whatever it is, right? Those things do happen. We can't explain it. It is what it is. I can't prove it's God. You can't prove it's not. But then when it comes to deciding who's going to be healed or whether you get healed, or in an illness, for example. So take my illness. It's endometriosis. There are some people that have complete success changing their diet. I was not one of them. There are people that have had cool energy experiences. I had great experiences, but it didn't heal me. It didn't fix it. And the problem is you get these people's hopes up because you tell themselves that they can heal themselves. You tell themselves that if they just think the right things or use the right stone or take the right class or any of these things. And I was careful. I didn't buy into a lot of the new stuff. I really did focus on tried, tested, and true wisdom traditions, stuff that I felt had a bit more evidence, a bit more meat to it, and stuff that I felt good about in my own gut, right? So I didn't get into a lot of the new, God, there's so many new like methods to energy work and things like that. And people are really, really gullible. And I never did get into that. But you do get your hopes up, and everyone tells you they can heal you, and every supplement says they can heal you, and every person says that you just have to, cure your sacral chakra, and that's why you're having pain. And they'll always have a reason. They believe that because there can be a spiritual reason to physical pain, that it's always, right? Again, no balance. It's all or nothing, all or nothing, all or nothing. And then when you don't get better, you end up just beating up on yourself because you can't figure out why you're not getting better. Well, why am I not positive enough? Am I not doing enough, treatments? Am I not paying enough to this practitioner? Am I not believing enough? Clearly, I'm not using the right stones. Whatever it is, you end up failing inevitably because you can't fix this thing. Endometriosis is created mostly by pollution and a massive problem with our endocrine system, likely caused by dioxins and plastics. That's not even a natural thing. I don't even know what you are supposed to do to deal with that. Yeah, you can take antioxidants and supplements, and I take lots of great stuff, and my diet's clean, and it helps a lot, but I couldn't get rid of it. And I certainly couldn't get rid of it through Reiki, right? So then you feel like you failed. Well, that's just, again, a weird shame thing telling you don't have enough faith in this new religion of New Ageism. And it's really disappointing, not just for people like me who had to shame themselves and finally recognize this wasn't the answer, but it actually stops people from getting treatment, you guys. I know women that will not go to a doctor because they believe they can, if they submit to needing a surgery to remove an invasive disease that is adhesing their organs to each other and causing them pain that makes them pass out, if they just believe hard enough, they won't have to get surgery. As soon as they submit to surgery, they've let it manifest. And it's like, okay, well, you can believe that, but that disease is growing in you, and you now have to deal with it. And I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this. You're going to need surgery. And if not, then you're one of the lucky ones that managed to break it all down through natural means. Good for you. Very happy for you. You obviously had a lower stage, whatever. There's people refusing treatment because they think they're failing by going to Western medicine. Natural health, you see this a lot, and you see this a lot in spiritual health. It's extremely sad. It's extremely dangerous because people are afraid of the pharmaceutical companies, are afraid of doctors to such an extent, and they want so badly to heal themselves through whatever means. Now, I see that with God as well. People will say, I'm avoiding chemo, I'm avoiding whatever because God's going to heal me. Well, again, God might heal you in a different way. You should probably take all of the things at your disposal, all of the tools to try to get better that you can. And yeah, you have to incorporate your spirit. You have to incorporate your mind. If you don't heal your whole body, you don't heal. Very fair. Most doctors see that now. But to just put all your eggs in one basket and then do something dumb, I don't think God honors that. And I also think that sometimes we're not meant to be fully healed at certain times. Everything I've went through, there's a lot of reasons I didn't get better. One is the disease itself. Another is my own immune system and my genetics. Another might be my environment. Some might be food. Some might be stress. There's so many factors. There's also just the factor of other people's decisions that I can't control, and the factor of fate and whether or not I was meant to go through something. At the end of the day, would I be making this YouTube video or this channel or any of this if I wasn't someone that went through illness? I don't think so. I think I would have been a workaholic. I would have gone into law, probably out of high school, and I probably would have burnt out young and been in the wrong relationship and been miserable. Like, I could see that having happened, and I can't say that for sure. But my illness stopped me. It showed me who I am and what I need to focus on. And if nothing else, it brought me into this weird path that brought me to where I am right now. It brought me Steve. It brought me all you guys, right? So, when it comes to healing, for example, Jane's story, it's like, that's beautiful. I absolutely believe that has happened. Why doesn't it happen for everyone? I don't know. A lot of reasons, right? We will never know. But I will say that it's not because you don't have enough faith. Because in New Ageism, it's always about you're not doing enough. You're not controlling enough. You don't have enough faith, right? And I think that's really, really sad. Just eat raw meat, AJ. Yeah, man. Well, raw meat. I'm a milquetoast carnivore. I said that today on Twitter, that I'm not a big fan of the flowing blood when I eat, but I eat a lot of beef, like an insane amount. Wild game, beef, some pork, chicken when I can. what can I say? Like it helps. It helps a lot. Goat cheese. I live on goat cheese. It's like my protein source number one. Lots of like fresh fruits and vegetables. I don't do much for buns anymore. I don't eat, like if I have a burger, I don't eat a bun. I don't eat bread. I don't eat any of that stuff. I do recommend a high meat diet. But I don't like raw foods. Sorry, AJ. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. Yeah, Lauren, my friend who was a nurse, told me stories like that. People with treatable cancers who chose natural healing until it was too late. Exactly. This is less about New Ageism and more about natural healing, but it's its own cult, right? Like, again, you have people that like refuse to take a pill. I won't take a painkiller because I'm suffering. Well, okay, put your body through immense destruction and exhaustion for no reason, then that's your choice, but you don't have to, right? And how do you balance that? Like, that's a tough one. Working in the natural field has been tricky because there's a lot of like shame and guilt. The same with your diet, right? Well, you're only sick because you're eating potatoes. It's like, screw you. I'm not sick because I'm eating potatoes, you know. And then again, you eat so well and then you still get sick. This is what happened when I went vegan. I went vegetarian and vegan and I felt awful. And all anybody told me was, you're not doing it right. You need to take more supplements. You're not doing it right. And it's like, maybe it just doesn't work for me. There's that lack of understanding of uniqueness of our bodies and our circumstances. It's so, so frustrating. Yeah, same thing. Lauren says, I've seen people walk away from horrific car accidents without a scratch. I feel it's because it wasn't their time. Very true, right? People are sometimes meant to go when they're meant to go. And sometimes I feel like there's been a couple times I was dumb enough that I should probably be dead. And I'm not. So I'm glad that I'm not. I see some discussion of suicide in there. Yeah, same idea. That was me, what, a year ago? Like, I can't believe you guys where I was at a year ago. And I was still into a lot of the New Ageism stuff last year. I just didn't realize how prevalent it was and how some of it's very scary. I even was looking into Wiccan stuff. Must have been last like December, January, when I was at my sickest. I'd had my surgery. I wasn't healing. I was stuck at home. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. every single day with like horrible pain. I couldn't sleep more than about 3 hours. I get up and do puzzles or watch like The Office over and over again just to keep my mind off stuff. And it was a very, very tough time. That's when I was feeling very suicidal. I was in a lot of pain. I couldn't have any pleasure things. There was no good food. There was no, anything, because it's a reproductive organ thing, obviously sexual, everything's affected. It's very, very destructive. I was very depressed. And I couldn't work and I couldn't feel, useful. And then of course I had this hole in my heart where I had just dumped Christianity and filled it with all of these things, these new age things. And it wasn't doing it. It wasn't at all. When shit really hit the fan, when everything fell apart, it wasn't deep enough, right? And that's the truth of it. It wasn't deep enough. If you're looking for spirituality, it won't sustain you when things get really, really, really bad. And that's something that I learned, kind of the hard way, right? And thank God I came out of it. But I don't know. I even walked into some Wiccan stuff. That started with, I guess looking into, like, you'll notice that I wear, and this is sort of what I was going to start off with. I always wear a cross. My other cross is with my dad. I gave it to him. It's an aventurine cross. It's aventurine's like a stone. It's good for your heart chakra, whatever. It's a vibrational therapy, whatever you want to call it. God, sir, made some pretty stones, if nothing else, if you just want to look at it that way. So I always wear a cross. And there's, of course, the Tree of Life, which is more of a Nordic kind of a pagan thing. So I recognize both sides of my history. One would be, a Celtic, sort of pagan history, maybe Druids, I don't know, something like that. The other being Christianity. And I recognize that those two are very opposite, and one came and colonized the other and everything else. I've had people comment on this being contradictory and silly. Well, no, it's just recognizing both sides of myself. But when I started looking into my more Celtic ancestry, of course, you look into the idea of gods and goddesses, and I started looking into goddesses, and specifically a goddess named Bridget. Now, interestingly enough, about Saint or Goddess Bridget is she was also a saint, Saint Bridget. And Saint Bridget is one of the Catholic saints. She is a saint of hearth and home and music, and I think metallurgy as well. So I found it very interesting time in my life when I was really wanting to focus on what it's like to build that hearth and home, allowing myself to have that feminine, thing that I had pushed away in my sort of progressive times where I was trying to be this cool, independent woman, allowing myself to sort of focus on that spirit. And now, if you're looking at her from a saint perspective, you're calling on the saint Bridget to help you, right? But when you're looking at rigid from a goddess perspective. Same woman, by the way, and historically proven woman, but the Catholics respected her so much that they turned her into a saint. And if you're looking at it from a goddess perspective, you're calling on her. You're kind of worshiping her, right? And that's where I never did get into doing any of the altars for her, or making the Bridget's knot, the Bridget's cross, or anything like that. My spirit couldn't do it. I felt wrong about it. I couldn't do a spiritual sort of, I guess I couldn't have a tradition where I would sit down and pray to her or something. That just felt so wrong from what I had grown up learning. So I think I did have a line this last year where I started to really feel like, okay, this isn't right. But I even almost got into, witchcraft, Wiccan, that kind of stuff. And I mean, we had this old book here that Steve had from years ago. His cousin gave him, or niece gave him, about spells. I mean, I threw it out, or I'm donating it. Like, I'm trying to get rid of some of this stuff, because some of it, quite honestly, feels dark and not good. And I don't want it in my house anymore, right? So just going to keep reading here, see if there's anything that I've missed. I'm sure I've missed lots, and I do apologize. I always say I'm going to read, but then I get talking. Thank you, Christendom. I appreciate that. Yeah, if you guys, I mean, a lot of you in the chat are Christians already. I said it to Rance Derrick the other day on a stream. He had come into the discussion about Joe Hazelton's experience with sort of the evil in the world, and dealing with, I think for him, it was more, the Freemasons. But someone, like Rance had come into the chat, and someone had mentioned something about, I can't remember what it was, but he had said something that he's not really religious or whatever, and he's not really too sure what to kind of say about all this stuff. And we got into just talking, if nothing else, about Revelations, and how if you do want to look into anything, if you're into political commentary, like, it's interesting what's going on in the Bible prophetically is pretty close to what's happening today. With that evil, right? There's a lot of evil in the world, and people are using an apathy. I think when anyone asking about agendas, there is an apathy being pushed. And if people just don't care and nothing matters, well, it's a lot easier to mess with people than when they're strong in their faith or believe something very specific, right? Good call, Irish. Good call. See here. I'm just going to see if there's any more questions. Do you guys have any questions at all? Possibly AJ Drew is from England. It's possible. I don't have the history. I have a whole bunch of ancestry is the problem. I'm like German, Norwegian, British, Scottish, and Irish. I don't know which I am most of, but judging by the nose, I call British. I just want to take a look here. I don't think there's any more questions at the moment. I think something big is happening with Catholicism. Queen Elizabeth, when she passes and a king is in power, it'll be interesting to say the least. Yeah, that is really interesting. Hi, Julie. I didn't know Julie was out there as well. Yeah, evil is everywhere, Julie. You're right. This is something that Steve has come around to. Like Steve, if I can just talk about him, I know he doesn't mind. He's a bit shy, so he doesn't usually come on camera. But one of these days, he also went through a period in high school where he was very interested in the Bible, very interested in Christianity, felt that spiritual pull, much like I did, and dove into it all, went to church with someone else that wasn't his family just to get the experience, and then kind of got away from it in his 20s too. And he got into other stuff very different than mine. His was more like dark music and stuff like that, which is a whole different ball game. But yeah, he also is into stones and all that. Like I said, he'd gone down to Peru. He's a very spiritual person. And so now coming back together, he met me when I was still right into my Reiki. I was actually actively doing Reiki as a business for a short time when he met me, as well as teaching piano. Not my shtick, by the way. I'm more of a performer than a teacher. And, we've kind of grown together religiously. And it was him that suggested we go back to church this last few months here. It's him that suggests that we kind of get into it. So it's been really nice that we're both growing in the same direction. And he's someone that really does help me to kind of grow in all of this. And he's really the one that noticed how evil everything is. And I think it was when that senator, that guy down in Virginia, talked about possibly, end of term abortions, having basically a live child be killed. He was just really shaken up by that. And then seeing Notre Dame and seeing what happened in Sri Lanka, like, we're both just so aware of the evil, and of course the evil against Christianity, like the fight against Christianity is so real. And you have to have something a lot bigger than yourself to understand. And there is a peace in it all. There is a peace and there is a calling. And there's a lot of stuff going on in my life that I'll get into in another video. Some pretty major announcement stuff I have coming up, just confirming it first. And it's because of a calling, right? And it will mean that I'll be persecuted, but it doesn't matter. You have to focus on the bigger picture. And the only way to understand what's going on around me, all of it, is really a spiritual battle. Like if you can see it as that as a Christian and from Revelation's point of view, it kind of makes sense. And then you have this sense of, okay, well, there is a God, he sits on the throne, and I'll just do my best and do some good work and move on. I mean, you can't control it, right? It takes, to submit almost takes away the pressure, I would argue. So let's see if there's another question here. Yeah, let's see. Ever seen the movie The Seventh Sign? I have not. Now I'm curious. I assume it's some sort of spiritual movie. AJ lists, I regret convincing a few people to be atheists. That's all good. Perhaps they'll come around. I don't know. I have no beef with anyone that believes anything. I just love like atheists and agnostics like Rants, like AJ, who are willing to recognize that like this religion matters and that the people they know aren't just a bunch of idiots. Like, I don't think AJ's ever called me a dumb, naive fool for being a Christian. So thank you, AJ. Always good to see you, right? I think there was a question about music. Someone asked, I don't know who you were, sorry, but someone asked if I was doing music for Tommy Robinson. So excited that he's running, you guys, by the way. I'll probably do a video about that soon. But yes, there's some music in the works. I'm working with a guy named Mick. He is part Brit, part Canadian, and he wrote a song a couple years back. We got in touch. Too bad Jesus is gone. It was through Jesus Gonzalez. He was looking for someone to write some music with. So we've been back and forth just through Skype. He's in Ontario. So we're going to do something. I don't know if it'll be used for his campaign, but yeah, there is something in the works. I'm pretty excited about that. Yeah, Julie, as long as you didn't convince him to follow Islam. That's true. That's very true. Yeah, I don't think I have much else to say. If anyone has any quick questions at the very end, I'll take one more look and see if I missed anybody. I'm sure I did miss a bunch of stuff that I wanted to get into. That's the way this goes. I should have probably wrote some things down. But when it comes to a topic like God, like New Ageism, all this stuff, it's hard to, you don't want to keep it in such a weird box. You want to make sure that you leave it open for discussion. There's a certain amount of sort of flow that can happen with this stuff. And I think it's important. So I appreciate you guys being patient through it all. You're good sports. I'm just enjoying the conversation with AJ in there. I'm happy to see you guys all just chatting. I think I'll probably leave it there. It's about, 8 o'clock here. So it's probably about 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, getting a bit late. Oh, one more question. Are you worried about the recent church burnings? Yeah, AJ, I am. I know some of them are just like electrical fires, old wood, old buildings. I know that, but I know a lot of them aren't. I don't know what to say about it. Weighed on my heart really heavy on Sunday. I was with my dad and I just wanted to avoid drama and politics for one day and enjoy a Sunday in real life in, a nice safe place and watching my nephews play football and all that stuff. But like, it was heavy on my heart. What happened, of course, in Sri Lanka was the worst of it. And then just seeing what happened with Notre Dame before that, all these churches across Canada. Yeah, it's very troubling, and I'm not surprised, and I don't think it's going to stop. And I just don't like that people have to start worrying about worshiping in Canada like it's a sanctuary. It should be a safe place. I think that's really sick. I don't know. There's a lot of hatred towards Christianity, and I know that there's been mistakes. Like, I'm not blind to that, but even when you talk about something like the First Nations relationships here in Canada, with the settlers, I guess, or the colonizers, as I've been called, you can't really say much because there's been these bad experiences. But when you do research, you start to recognize how many white people weren't assholes. For example, when Steve and I were looking for a church to get married in, we originally were going to go down to more of the area that my parents are in, the Fort Capel Valley, and we had looked at a church there, and it was a beautiful Catholic church with a beautiful history, and they didn't let us in. We're not Catholic, which is fine. So we couldn't get married there. But before I looked into it, I found out that they were a church that helped the Métis. They fed and clothed them. They helped them during battles, local battles. They also were against the residential school system, and they fought, for justice in that respect. Just really good people. And no one ever talks about those Christians. No one ever talks about those white males. No one ever talks about the settlers who helped clothe people in the cold. No one ever talks about the people who befriended those of a different race. I don't know what my ancestors specifically did. I'm going to guess they were a bunch of poor farmers that pretty much didn't go to town more than once a month to get supplies and probably barely saw anybody of another race, except a few people maybe in their church or something. Like, there's really, it's hard to say, but I don't believe for a second that everybody in one religion or race has been oppressive. That's insane. That's like statistically impossible that an entire race is like that. This is tough, right? Because when you get into this, then you start looking at Canada and the state that we're on, where we do not only are we honoring like, unceded land and everything, we're now basically wiping away anything that Christians did. And anytime someone says it's a Christian country, people get all mad. And it's like, well, I didn't diminish Aboriginal spirituality. And I think that we should focus on more Aboriginal culture. I think it's great. I think it's a beautiful part of our history. And if you guys have experienced it, you'll know what I mean. But that doesn't mean you have to diminish Christianity. It did not do as much bad as people say. It drives me crazy. No one looks at the good. Nobody does. And it's very frustrating as a rural person who sees what the church does in individual communities. To see the arrogance against it. It's arrogance, you guys. It's very frustrating. I don't like where we're going as a nation. It's happening in lots of Western countries, but they just like, they don't even want to rebuild Notre Dame as a Christian church. They just want to build it as an interfaith thing. Well, that's another thing. I was a big part of a Unitarian church, not a big part. I went a few times and I supported them. But, that idea of, okay, well, there's no such thing as one religion, then we should just big mosh posh of everything. And we do songs from Leonard Cohen, and then we do a song from Sarah McLachlan, and then we do an Aboriginal spiritual song, and then we do an Islamic verse, and then we do a Buddhist verse, and then we do a Christian verse. And it's like, oh, that's so beautiful, all the peaceful religions all together. Well, that's a lovely idea, but like, I don't know, you guys. I think a lot of it spurs out of this like indecision and an ultimate resentment towards Christianity. And I don't feel like you can just pick and choose. That's not really fair. That's not really what Christianity is. You either kind of believe that Christ is Lord and Savior, or you don't, right? And this is where I appreciate so many of my Christian followers have been so patient with me, because I've so blatantly had trouble saying that I'm a follower of Christ, and accepting the biggest portion of Christianity. But it really did take like a bit of a hit between the eyes to kind of get there. And I think what happens is people just don't want to commit to anything. They don't want to commit to anything that makes them feel uncomfortable. And Christianity will make you feel uncomfortable because you are ultimately trying to stay a better person, and you're being asked to answer to your brothers, sisters, and your God. And the word sin comes up, and nobody likes that either. So when it comes to Christian churches burning, I just feel like people are happy about it. And much like Notre Dame, they're glad. Like, I was working with someone, and she basically said, good, I'm glad it's gone. We should just tear it all down, like Christianity in general. Just tear it all down. Screw it, right? And I was like, first of all, that's a little rude considering you can see the cross on my chest, but whatever. This is someone who also believes that you can manifest anything and everything, right? And so it's like, what are you going to say to that? I try to just be open. I see a lot of hurt in that kind of mentality, and I hope that maybe I can chat with her one day about it. But if everyone's thinking that, if everyone just thinks, screw the Christians, it's about time, it's over anyway, well, yeah, you're not going to get much pushback, and these churches are going to burn, and there's going to be more and more reasons for it, and no one's going to care. And that's what I see. It's not just that it's happening, it's that nobody cares. I'm just going to look down one more time here. Yeah, Christians are the only faith with eternal damnation for misdeeds, which is a good thing. All other religions have a way out. That's true. Yeah, reincarnation, whatever else. I wonder sometimes people, that's like the biggest negative for Christianity is supposedly our harshness, right? That's where I say the balance of compassion, love, mercy, forgiveness, balance with justice, righteousness, and truth, discipline, right? You definitely do. So I think I will leave you guys there. 1 John 5:3. I'm going to write that down and take a look at that when I get off. Oh, thanks, Rainey. I guess if I'm on a roll, I can keep going. It's up to you guys. I don't even know. I can't see how many people are in there. How many people are in the chat? I'm showing like, it's not even showing how many, which is super bizarre. I don't know why that is. Almost 2 billion of us. Yeah, there is. That's true, Jeremy. That's true. 32. Okay, well, it's not bad. I didn't think anybody even was going to pop out. So no, I think I'll head out for the night. Yeah, I think that's all about what I have to say. If you have any more questions, if there's something I didn't cover, feel free to ask. These will be topics I'll cover in the future. I spent a good almost decade on this stuff, so there's a good chance that there will be more to cover. Even when it comes to just things like energy work and all of that, and the stuff that I have kind of stuck with, some of the chakra stuff, like astrology. I have a goat, tattooed on my shoulder because I'm a Capricorn. But God made the heavens and the earth, and it's not impossible to think that he left a few signs in there as well. So again, it's one of those things where you can argue it can be bad or good. I think a lot of it's good. I really do. I think you have to be careful, though, I guess is my ultimate message. If everyone can just be very, very cautious of this stuff, but don't judge too hard, because a lot of people are just trying to find this other path, this alternative path, right? And it becomes their own cult. It becomes their own weird religion. And a lot of them are being shamed just as much as people are in, churches from petty other people, because it's people that ruin religion, you guys. It's people. God is God. God is pure. We suck. That's sort of the overall rule. So thank you guys for showing up. Julie, Jane, Saint, all of you. Much appreciated. And if you don't mind throwing a like on this, that would be great. Just so you guys know. Oh, Rainy's a Capricorn too. Good to know. Interesting fun fact. Tons of Capricorns in politics. Trudeau is a Capricorn. I got to end this on some disappointment. Trudeau is a Capricorn. Jagmeet Singh is a Capricorn. But Maxime Bernier is a Capricorn as well. I think Ben Shapiro is as well. Whole bunch of us. Fire and earth signs. And yes, El Vaquero, you did tune at the end. You'll have to watch after. Yeah, thank you guys for joining. Stay tuned. I think Monday night I'm going to do an interview with Sheila Gunn Reid again. I think it's going to be coming out probably Wednesday on her gun show or whatever. We're going to do a chat of some kind next week, so look forward to that. Irish Stock says stick around please to chat about what. Irish, what do you want to talk about? I'm happy to hang out for a little longer. I just don't want to keep you guys dragging along. What do you want to talk about, Irish? I'm just going to read a couple more things in the chat, since it seems a couple people want me to stick around. If you have any other questions that have nothing to do with this, that's also fine. Oh, and Jesus is gone already. I do have a song coming up for him, but that one, he's not here anymore, so that won't help. We can talk about the new loony. The new loony. That's a whole other ball game. You guys are going to get me started. Rance Derek has a way funnier take on that than I do. I think I will probably quit for the night, if nothing else, because when I went for supper, I ate something that I think is bugging me a little bit and had some MSG in it. So if I stick around for too much longer, I'll probably have a headache. But I will maybe do a quick video tonight just to update you guys on some of the stuff that I'm going through. As a hint, Tommy Robinson is running for office. A certain gal in a purple shirt might also be getting into politics slightly unwillingly. So we'll kind of leave it there. But yeah, there's a good chance that you guys will be seeing me on more platforms than just YouTube. So I'll keep it at that for now. I hope you guys have a really good weekend. Thank you for the chat. Thanks for the questions. Like I said, feel free to throw any more questions out if you have them. And Christendom wants to tell me something. So I will turn off the stream, but I will keep looking in the chat because I think you can keep chatting. Yes, Carl Benjamin also is running. He's running for UKIP. I think Tommy's going independent. I think Count Dankula is running too, isn't he? I heard Carl Benjamin and Count Dankula talking about, the journalists and how they're what did he call him? I can't remember what Carl Benjamin called journalists, but it was pretty classic. They're snarky, those guys. They're snarky. Christendom, what? I hear you. I'm here. Are you like typing very quickly to make sure you get something in? Garlic. What about garlic? Yeah, Count is running. Okay, I thought so. Yeah. What I'm seeing, you guys, is I'll get into that in my separate video, but I'm seeing that people are just standing up and saying enough's enough. I don't even know if I'm capable of doing this, but screw it. I can't not do anything, right? And that's kind of where I'm at, right? So I'm going to try to build this party, come hell or high water. So I don't know how much longer I can wait, Christendom. So I will turn this off for now. And like I said, I'll let you keep going in the chat. And if you want to write it in the comments, if it disappears, that's cool. And thank you, Irish. I think you meant that to me. I don't know if interesting is good, but we'll say good. Good on you, Kelly. Thank you, AJ. Oh, investigate was under the pyramids. Okay. There, I got it, Christendom. You got it in just under the nick of time. I'll look into that too. So yeah, maybe I'll do this again. Maybe I'll next time write some more stuff down and we'll dive into some very specific stuff if you guys are interested. Say, for example, like the shamanism thing or energy stuff. Because yeah, if you're interested in this stuff, I'm happy to talk about it. So have a good one. As always, there it is. Dirty, dirty smearmongers. Thank you, by the way, Jefferstone. That's what he called them, dirty, dirty smearmongers. And on that beautiful note of how horrible the media has been, I'll leave you guys. As always, be good to each other, but not because the government tells you to. Bye, guys.